Y'all gotta pick a side and pick it right now.
Janot ain't gonna stop till he takes everything.
I believe you can win this one.
I want justice for my wife's murder.
Let's take Tommy Egan down.
All right, let's go.
They're closing in.
Am I calling a favor?
Now, in today's breakdown, we are going to be going through our last and final preview of Power Book 4 Force. The end is finally here. The end of the road for Tommy in Chicago. Some of these characters in this particular world are Power, and for Chicago as a whole. Not to say that we won't ever come back to Chicago, because Gary Lennon has teased that he will be leaving some loose threads open, and that's the mindset I think we need to take when we approach this final episode. Some characters will no doubt die. I do also expect 1 or 2 characters to also end up in jail, but I do expect some characters to remain alive in the wind who can always pop back up later on in the next Power show if Gary Lennon decides to use them. No doubt there will also be a lot of twists and turns in this final episode that we aren't expecting and haven't predicted, which is definitely all a part of the fun when it comes to Power, where they then end the episode with us asking the question, where the hell do they go from here? That's what Gary Lennon has teased for episode 10. They've got a lot of storylines that they kind of need to wrap up, minus the loose threads that they do leave open. That does include law enforcement, which branches off into Bobby DeFranco, AUSA Seng, and also the character who apparently doesn't exist, Chen. There's also Shanti Showstopper, where do they finish with her story arc, the funeral, which will then lead to the all-out war between Channard, CBI, and the Marquez Cartel. The fallout from Diamond's death, where does it leave CBI? There's also the storyline around Maria, Miguel, D-Mac, Kay Egan. What's up with the situation as well involving Che and the Estrada Cartel? Will Maria leave to go to Mexico? And of course, the moment of truth, will we see Tariq St. Patrick's return? Honestly, it can easily be a 2-hour finale. But with that being said, we are going to be running through a quick preview as usual, which is actually preview number 2. I did actually go through the exclusive images earlier in the week, but there are also more. So stick with this video right through to the very end. So as usual, starting with the title and synopsis. Now the title of episode 10 is Beginning of the End, and the synopsis reads, the mounting pressure for retaliation looms as disastrous moves and shocking secrets shake the streets. Now starting with this funeral scene, we are going to see them laying JP to rest, burying not just a brother, but also a son, a friend, and also a loved one to no doubt many. But for those who watched my breakdown earlier in the week, I had a couple of questions on the funeral itself, and I specifically asked, will we see Herman, JP's father? And the answer is, yes, we will. We've got him pictured here standing next to D-Mac, so we will be seeing Herman return, and I'm sure we'll also hear a couple of conversations between maybe Herman and Kate. They do have a history, but also with Tommy as well. Back in season 1, he was very wary of Tommy entering JP's life and bringing trouble to his doorstep. So does he blame Tommy? What does he say to Kate? And how does he react to his son's death? Because nobody ever wants to be burying their son. As I mentioned just a moment ago, JP wasn't just a brother, and over on Big Gold Belt, they did release another exclusive clip of Kate giving the eulogy at the funeral.
Having to bury your child goes against the law of nature.
Again, as always, the link to the full clip will be down below in the description section and also in the comment section. But it is heartbreaking. I'm not going to say too much on it at this particular moment in time. I am going to save what I have for my breakdown for episode 10. What I will say though is, you look at Maria in this scene holding her stomach. We know she's pregnant. Is this the moment where she decides to potentially leave Chicago? Food for thought. But it really is a heartbreaking eulogy, brilliantly delivered by Patricia Kalemba. I'm not sure why she wasn't at Ghost's funeral, if I'm going to be totally honest. I would have thought she would have been, but I guess that's a topic for a different day. Now with the funeral itself, I don't personally think Channard will open fire. Earlier in the week, we went through these images with how relaxed Tommy and Miguel seem, how relaxed Maria and Tommy seem here. I think Tommy knows to protect the boundaries of in and around the church while they do put JP to rest. But in and around the funeral, not too sure whether it is before or after, Tommy will also be telling D-Mac to keep a cool head.
I can't have you wilding out on me right now. Janot is gonna pay for what he did to your father. I promise. But our next move has got to be solid.
This was also another exclusive clip that was released when Joseph Sikora did his interview with Sherry Shepherd. Again, for those who haven't seen it, I will link it down below with the other clip as well. But in episode 10, we will be seeing Tommy taking D-Mac under his wing, telling him to calm down. He can't have him wiling out on him at this moment in time because he needs D-Mac. Going into episode 10, Tommy will be dealing with a lot of problems that we are going to run through in just a moment, but you're talking law enforcement, CBI, getting revenge on Jannard, keeping his family safe, burying JP, keeping D-Mac safe. It does also look like he may have a problem with Che. There's also the problem of Roberto Ortega and the Marquez cartel, as Maria left Tommy to go to Mexico, leaving this letter, and who knows what else they're going to throw at Tommy in episode 10. Just imagine if Miguel dies at some point as well, someone who now has Tommy's back. He definitely is going to need D-Mac to keep a calm head, don't do anything reckless or stupid, because if he were to lose D-Mac or anything happens to Tommy at this moment in time, who's going to be there to look after their family? So this partnership of Tommy and D-Mac, him mentoring him, guiding him, mentioning Kanan again, something to definitely keep in mind. We will hear another Kanan mention in this particular episode. We are going to see a lot more of it in episode 10 and hopefully after season 3 as well. Now in this exclusive clip, D-Mac did want to go and hunt down Jannard, and that will be one of the main plot points they have to address in episode 10. They will come face to face with him at some point, and they definitely will put an end to that storyline one way or another, which I personally do think ends in Jannard's death. I believe early doors the Raheem betrayal will have to be dealt with. That's a plot point I do think will be closed off very swiftly by an unhinged Jannard. But then I'm expecting Jannard to be in big trouble in episode 10. Chris Lofton did post a couple of extra images of episode 10 over on social media, and this was one which we hadn't seen before. It's a picture of Big Smurf putting a gun to Jannard, and the fact that we have Bones and Big Smurf potentially turning on Jannard over here, it does look like the last of CBI that were in his corner could potentially be gone. And if they are to turn their back on Jannard, that probably does leave him high and dry in episode 10, with maybe only the Marquez cartel backing him, because they still have a common enemy, which is Tommy. Maybe he can convince them or lie to them that he's got things on lock when he doesn't. Originally, when we saw this image here of Bones shooting at the warehouse, we all assumed he'd be on Jannard's side. But what if Tommy's able to convince them that the real enemy is the Marquez cartel and Jannard? Well and truly, the walls do look like they are beginning to close in on Jannard, especially with these extra images of Big Smurf. So I am expecting Jannard to bite the dust in episode 10, even though during the battle Tommy does look like he is going to be in trouble. At some point I do expect Jannard to be taken care of. Whether D-Mac is the one to pull the trigger, I do think it has to be for killing JP and also for shooting him twice as well. He definitely does owe Jannard a bullet, but let's wait and see how it happens, because the walls do seem like they are closing in on Jannard. They do look like they're closing in with the loss of the coalition, the loss of perhaps Bones and Big Smurf, of course the loss of Diamond, the impact of his death. That really is going to have a huge impact on Jannard's mental state and across the coalition. The loss of perhaps Bones and Big Smurf, who are probably tired of Jannard's bullshit, to be honest. They're probably looking at him constantly being high and making bad decisions. So the end is definitely here for Jannard Sampson, aka Junkie Jannard, aka Double J. Now with the cartel, earlier this week I mentioned Che is probably sick and tired of Tommy and Miguel's antics in the streets. I'm not sure what has brought them over this time around, but it definitely doesn't look good. I wouldn't even be surprised if Che were to cut them off completely, because if you think about how do they really close the walls in on Tommy at the end of his journey in Chicago, well, one way is to lose the connect. Does that mean Shanti has betrayed him? Not necessarily, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did end up being the queen pin of Chicago. That's something that could very well be on the cards. At this moment in time, going into episode 10, I am leaning more towards Miguel dying, so who then takes over the city if those two are gone? It leaves Shanti. But does that mean that she's working with Che under Tommy, or is she now working for herself, either with Che or Roberto Ortega and the Marquez cartel? There's definitely a lot of questions of how they leave the drug game in Chicago come the end. What happens with Che, Roberto Ortega, the Estrada cartel and the Marquez cartel, and the business in Chicago at the end of episode 10? Because there is also the beef between the Estrada cartel and the Marquez cartel. Or is there a twist there as well? Now in terms of law enforcement, we went through this earlier in the week, so I am going to keep this short and sweet. Bobby DeFranco will confront AUSA Seng, and my prediction around this particular plot point is AUSA Seng ending up in handcuffs. I do think at least one person will be put in an orange jumpsuit, but I do feel there is a twist to come with this story as well. Does AUSA Seng manage to turn the tables on Bobby DeFranco? Where does Chen fit into the storyline after Trina Delgado figured out he doesn't exist? Does Bobby DeFranco still go after Tommy, or is he able to get law enforcement off his back, maybe kind of planting the gun on someone else? There's definitely a lot of ways they can take this, and I do think they do have a few surprises up their sleeve as well. That also includes with Vic Flynn. We know he did leave based on these images here, but will they actually spring up a surprise, and will he actually help Tommy? Or will he actually be coming back to try and bring Tommy down once and for all? And if so, who with? That's the question. We know he's speaking to someone here. Is it Bobby DeFranco? Is it Aunt Beth? Or is it actually a new threat that's emerged? For example, Chen, Madame Wu and the Chinese, or perhaps even the Italians. That definitely is another thing to keep in mind. There are a couple of loose threads open that they may come back to in episode 10. For example, Miguel killing Che's son. In the synopsis, it does tease that more secrets are going to be spilled. So if we're talking about Miguel potentially not surviving episode 10 and Maria potentially also leaving, is Miguel dead? Has that secret been exposed where Miguel killed Che's son? Is that what pushed her to write this letter and leave? There's also D-Mac stealing Bolo's brick back in episode 2. Do the Chinese turn into the next big threat after Tommy's taken out the guys who were supposed to distribute their fentanyl? There are so many different directions they can take this in. Again, the episode can easily be 2 hours long because there is so much to wrap up and also leave as cliffhangers going into the next Power show, with one of them potentially being Tariq St. Patrick.
Am I calling a favor?
So tell them to bring the smoke. We'll come lay him the fuck out. Simple.
Now, with the potential return of Tariq, I do think throughout the episode, if Tariq is to return, throughout episode 10, they do need to answer the question of why and how. For example, are the walls really closing in on Tommy to the point where he has no choice and no option left but to call Tariq? For example, he's got law enforcement on him, a problem with Bobby DeFranco, maybe Shanti does stab him in his back, maybe he does also lose Miguel, maybe Che and the Estrada cartel are fed up with his antics in the streets and Che finally cuts Tommy loose. He has a Jannard problem, a Vic Flynn problem. Everywhere Tommy turns, he has big problems. And I have said this before in one of my previous breakdowns, from the feds to the streets, everyone wants a piece of Tommy Egan. So I do feel like throughout episode 10, they do need to create these problems, which then gives Tommy no choice but to call Tariq, and I do think he will show up. It's all poised, they've been teasing it for a while. The favor that Tommy's calling for in the trailer for episode 10, the end credit scene of Power Book 2 Go season 4, the Crew Has It podcast conveniently returning 4 days after episode 10, and you also have the potential new spin-off in Legacy. I do think it is all perfectly timed for Tariq to return. It's just a question of how and why. What impact does he make while he's in Chicago? And then what happens next? Because best believe they will be leaving us on a few cliffhangers with a few questions. There will be some big major talking points that has us talking all the way up to the next Power show. Come the end of episode 10, I am expecting a cliffhanger of some sort that just makes us go back to that question that Gary Lennon teased in his interview. Where the hell do they go from here? But that's a wrap for the final preview of Power Book 4 Force. I do have mixed feelings at this moment in time. I'm definitely excited to see how it all unfolds, but at the same time kind of sad that it is ending. But when you look at the bigger picture, I'm sure they'll also be leaving us on a cliffhanger or two, which will no doubt provide us with big talking points that then transitions us into the next phase of Power. And shortly after episode 10, I am also expecting big news announcements, so keep your eyes peeled for them as well. With that being said, drop all your final predictions down below in the comment section. And as always, I will see you guys back here sometime late morning with my breakdown for episode 10. But with it being episode 10 and because I am expecting a lot of articles and announcements, bear with me tomorrow if this week I do upload a bit later. But as always, thank you guys for watching. Enjoy the episode tomorrow and I will see you guys back here after the final episode of Power Book 4 Force.